BBC. BBC. BBC.
Oh, oh. Okay, hold on. I think we're good. I think we got it. Let me try. Let me just make sure that the title's changed on everyone. Okay. Twitch it is not. So that's a bummer. Well, that's okay.
Okay, unmute. Okay, cool. QAnon.
Myanmar, India, and Russia.
India.
Okay, there we go.
The protest party.
Yeah. News site tier list and then protest party. India, Myanmar, and Russia.
Hell
Party.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have the chats open for each stream. And we are live. So then we can just record whatever we want. So which one do you want to do first?
I don't care, whatever you think. Maybe international or what? I don't care.
Yeah, let's do the international stuff first, and then we can chill out at the end with some tier list and goof around.
Absolutely.
By the way, I have a great site. I posted at the bottom of our chat the tier maker of credibility of news sites, and it's a really easy site to just actually you click and drag the logo into the S through F tier, and it already has like AP, BBC. Yeah, oh yeah. And so then
what does the S stand for?
S is like better than A. That's like, you know, special, or it's like it comes from video game lingo. It's like Japanese games, you would have like it would rate your boss kill and have like S tier was like super. So it's like better than the best. Like S tier is like God tier.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Sweet.
Cool. All right. So let's do you want to intro international and I intro tier list?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Sweet, man. All right. Well, let me know when you want to record.
Take a sip of my tea. And let's do it.
Go for it. All right. Oh, actually, hold on. Actually, let me get some water.
Yeah, don't want that dry mouth. Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Whoever's in the chat so far. Hello. How's everyone doing?
Okay. All right. Oh, and audio. I turned myself up this week because I was low last week, right?
Yeah, I had to do that duplication with yours because it's just like I was extra loud last week a little bit. So.
Okay. So say something again.
Hello, my wife is back from Mexico.
Okay, so you're there and I'm up there. Okay, hopefully it's a little bit better.
Yeah, no worries.
Really frustrating how it looks like it's even on my end, and then I don't think it is on yours. But anyway,
this mic I got, if I'm too close to it, it's going to be loud. So I need to be further back from it. Is the problem, I think.
Well, hopefully I evened it out. Hopefully I evened out better than last week, and let me know how it goes.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, recording in 3, 2, 1.
Well, so I'm clear people are following the news. The second impeachment's happening. And guess what? Drew and I are not going to be covering it. Yeah. We're going to wait to a later time. But today we are going to be talking about kind of a plethora of international events. There seems to be a trend. In Russia, India, and now Myanmar, there are protests. And I think it's showing a trend. So today, Drew and I are just going to do somewhat of a housekeeping / just discussion on why these protests are happening and what's happening around the world. Drew, how are you, man? I heard you went backpacking last week. How was that?
It was good, man. It was good. Yeah, a couple days ago, I backpacked in Los Padres National Forest in Southern California, and it was beautiful. It was like super hot in the middle of the day, and then super cold at night. Got below freezing. It was like a land of extremes, but I enjoyed it a lot. But that being said, it's kind of a good way to describe how I've been following politics lately. Like I after the whole riot in the Capitol, and then the inauguration, I kind of took a step back I wanted to take, or like mentally for a little bit from politics, and that backpacking trip was a good way to do it. But now that now I'm back from that, it almost does seem like there's a lot happened that I quote unquote missed or need to get caught up on. And I think maybe a lot of Americans might feel the same way because we've been so, kind of taken aback by what's happening in our own country, that it's good to be reminded of what's going on around the world. And so I'm glad we're doing this episode, because there is a lot going on around the world, including protests for various reasons in 3 countries. So like you mentioned a little bit today, we're going to be looking at Myanmar. There was a military coup, which is pretty wild. We're going to be looking at India with some of the largest protests in the largest democracy. And then also Russia. We have, someone who was what he claims to have attempted poisoning and assassination is now in prison after returning to Russia, sparking protests there. So I'm stoked to get into this stuff because it's just it's nice to not talk about Trump for once.
Absolutely, and I'm worried we're going to be probably talking about Trump again pretty soon. So it's nice to kind of get a detox from just the craziness of the U.S. for a little bit, definitely. And you're right. And there's an interesting trend going on. I mean, we've been covering it, on and off for a while. There's a lot of protests against countries or inside of countries that I think we kind of think are democracies, and sometimes maybe they're not. And I just wanted to start with kind of this just blanket statement, mainly with Russia and Myanmar. So if you're okay, do you want to start with those two? Because
sure.
I actually think that there's a parallel between Russia and Myanmar. It seems like both of them have kind of crossed the brink from the illusion of democracy to now clearly just a one-party rule.
Yeah.
And why I mean that is, well, in Myanmar. So let's just start with Myanmar for a second. Just a quick background, because you and I did an episode, I think about a year ago now, on this actual crisis in the Rohingyas, who are basically being killed off by the military and the Myanmar Burmese government. And so basically what happened is I think it was 1948, Burma, as it was called at the time, had their independence. And since then, basically the military has brought stability and a one-party rule to the country. But then in, I think it was the late 80s, the daughter of Aung San, who is Aung San Suu Kyi, she basically became kind of this national leader with the National League for Democracy. And she was locked up for a long time. But then in 2015, she became the leader of Myanmar's first civilian government. And it took more than half a century to do so. But basically, the military still is in power. But the NLD, or the National League for Democracy, actually had a majority and kept winning more and more majorities in all these elections. And the military still has been controlling the state in terms of who actually has the final say. But she kept trying to see how far she could get. Like, for example, she wasn't allowed to be a president, so she crafted the role of a state counselor with the hopes to kind of sidestep the military. But what happened last week is that there was another kind of landslide election for the NLD party, which happened back in the fall. But since then, the military's kind of decided, okay, we're not going to let this party kind of masquerade inside of our establishment anymore. And they did what I don't really think was completely a military coup. I think it was just a consolidation of power. And yes, so now she is back in jail and the military is running the country again. And it's kind of alarming. But again, I don't think this country was ever a democracy. We've tried to dress them up as a democracy, but it's an authoritarian regime. And now we're at a part where she is popular, the NLD is popular, but the military controls it. But what do you do when now the military has openly done something of a quasi-coup and removed her from any power? Because now it's out in the open. It's an authoritarian regime.
Yeah, it was kind of the wolf in sheep's clothing, which is a good, both Myanmar and Russia are like that. Yeah, I mean, I think I watched this 8-minute video, which I'm not going to play here right now. But, it has, let me get her name real quick. I wrote it down. Laurel Miller, the director of the Asia program at the International Crisis Group. She this redhead lady here, talks about how, there was institutional problems that led to this. And again, it's looking at the history of Myanmar. The military has been in power for so long. It was only because of the massive protests in 2007 that they even let up a little bit and allowed democracy, quote unquote, to happen in Myanmar, right? And this this director of the Asia program, she talks about how the world at the time was super celebratory, almost prematurely, that Myanmar is now a democracy, welcome it to the democratic world in open arms. And the problem was that the institutional things, which we talked about on our previous episode, is that 25% of the parliament is reserved and needs to be reserved for military officials. So that's, a quarter of your government. And the kicker is, to make constitutional changes in Myanmar, you need over 3/4 of parliament. So if the military always has 1/4 of parliament, and the military boys, I imagine, probably all vote together on decisions, right? They'll all lobby together. They probably don't split at all or much, is my guess. And so if you can just retain that 25% of the military, then there will never be constitutional changes. So one of the reasons that people think that this happened right now is because Sun Suu Kyi was trying to make constitutional changes that were, that the military thought were, against them. What's interesting is they probably could have avoided those changes just by voting their certain way, but instead they did this coup. Now I'm interested to think. So you said it's not a military coup, but a consolidation of power. Like, what do you mean by that?
So the reason why I say that is because the military was always in power.
Okay.
There was kind of this facade of, okay, I mean, it's actually more than just a facade, because the NLD in the last election won 83% of Myanmar's vote. And the U.S., the USDP, which is the Union Solidarity and Development Party, which is basically the military, only won 7%. Mm-hmm. And so the military, in my opinion, who has always been in power, let's remember that the leader of the NLD and the state councilor, she was never in charge of the country as much as she wanted to be. The military were always overseeing it. So she was kind of dancing on a line between leading the country and appeasing the military.
Right.
And I think that they're getting nervous and scared. So they actually just did what was already their right, which was getting rid of her, which I'm not agreeing with. But I just don't think it's a blatant coup, because they never really didn't have powers. That's all I would say.
Yeah, it's just... Yeah, they were just kind of like, yeah. I see what you mean.
Which
I
was
see what
stupid.
You mean. I see what you mean.
Which was stupid.
Yeah. So
Yes.
they also claimed that the elections that Sun Suu Kyi won over 80% of the vote in were fraudulent. And they claimed that I think it was something like 6 million votes were fraudulent, and that's their justification for why they're taking over the government for 1 year, is what I'm hearing now. So the military says, we're going to take over the government for 1 year, then we'll give you back your democracy. Again, it's a weird thing to think, like, will it ever really be a democracy if it's like this? If the military can just take it and give it as it wants to. Whereas in the United States, we have a very strict thing about the military doesn't get engaged in politics. That's I think you're right that it may have never even been a democracy truly in the first place. And this is, I mean, pretty much that's what it is on the ground. If 84% of people want someone to be in power and they can't be, then it's not a democracy. So what's the reaction is some of the protests now. So if you see, like, Al Jazeera today's put out a video about, Myanmar police firing rubber bullets, warning shots at protesters. I saw a viral video of 2 Myanmar police switching sides as they were hosing down protesters today. 2 of them thought this was, I had had enough, and they switched over to the people, put their shield up to block the hose. Now that's a nice, goody two shoes feeling story, but we'll have to see if there really is enough public pressure to change something like this. The last time we did see the amount of protests we're seeing in Myanmar was 2007, when the military relinquished power somewhat to a democracy before. So it could happen. I'm interested to see what the big players are. So what do you think major players are going to think about this, Alex?
So the Atlantic had a great line where it was basically like, Obama's success with Myanmar is now going to be Biden's nightmare, which is kind of interesting, because for people who maybe didn't listen to that other episode we did, it was Barack Obama and Ben Rhodes of the state, or of one of his national security advisors, who were kind of instrumental in talking with Xi and actually really helped her kind of get this seat at the table in the NLD, where she did become the state counselor.
Right.
So it was a huge victory for Obama's administration to kind of recognize her as somewhat of a quasi-leader of Myanmar on an international stage. But then, flash forward a year and a half, you had this escalating genocide. Let's just call it a genocide. That's what it is, of the Rohingya Muslims, who just didn't really fit into what the, ruling Buddhist party called as kind of a unity inside of the country. And she basically went in front of The Hague and said it wasn't genocide and said it was okay. And That's why I read that quote from The Economist at the beginning that said, attempts to dress up authoritarian regimes as democracies are always bound to fail. And, we talked about this with Ethiopia right now,
Right.
is it's a very similar thing. Is she won a Nobel Peace Prize, and then about a year later, she's actually like, I wouldn't say instrumental, because she probably didn't want to kill these people, but there's nothing she could have done because, again, of the power of the military. And so I think there's going to be a really tough issue with Biden going into this, because he's already talked about responding. But sanctions are just going to hurt the poorest. And at the same time, if we push them away, the Chinese are there. And I was reading an interesting part where, let me see, there's a name for it. Yeah, there's the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, which is over $21 billion worth of country.
Right.
And it's just basically this openness at this deep water port. There's a railway, oil, and gas pipelines. And so I think the U.S. especially is in a very tough position right now, because we don't want to push them towards China. And I guess one of the main reasons why the military actually wanted to let the NLD get some power was because they didn't want Myanmar to go closer to China due to tourism. So to go back just a little bit, I actually think the military, this is something I meant to say, is that I think the military was stupid for openly getting rid of Xi, because now it's out in the open that they are against it and countries are going to respond. But to answer your question, I think it's going to be tough, man. Like, I don't know what Biden does. Do you sanction them? Do you open up diplomatic talks with the generals? I don't know. But I think it's going to be tough, and China's going to move in.
Yeah, China's definitely going to move in, and I think that's a big part of this story, is that the bigger players, like you said, Biden wants to do sanctions, and while I agree with you, sanctions mostly only hurt the little guy. I don't even think it would hurt Myanmar that much anyway. I really don't think we even do much business in besides some maybe textile stuff. I think most of, like what you said, is Myanmar is more concerned with their relationship with China. I don't think they look to the West as their leaders at all. I mean, sure, it's nice to get a nice, pat on the back from Barack Obama, but I think Myanmar is more worried about what China wants. And like you said, they're part of that Belt and Road initiative that China's pushing so much in the foreign world and outside of their domestic infrastructure, is just helping these other Southeast Asian, Middle Eastern countries, Eastern European countries, even African countries get on board with Chinese implementations of infrastructure. That's super important to Myanmar, way more than like Biden sanctions, I think. So I really don't think the U.S. has much to even do. We can say all we want, and we should. I think it's still valid to call out, hey, we don't really want military coups. I mean, we don't like we've had kind of problems with some weird stuff like that ourselves recently. Maybe not to the scale like this, but no one likes coups. And so I see why Biden would want to call out sanctions. Obviously, I think it's already happening that we're seeing the UN say that there's no evidence of the electoral fraud that the military is claiming in Myanmar. There's definitely like voting rights groups and humanitarian groups that are saying that already. Including, let me just get including one. I had a source somewhere. I'm sorry, but there's definitely groups claiming that these fraud claims are unfounded. And so I don't really know what the U.S. could do. I think that Myanmar is more worried about China. And I think the part of that Rohingya thing plays a part of it. Because Sun Suu Kyi, probably, like you said, probably doesn't want to be engaged in a genocide by her military, but was caught between a rock and a hard place. Not only did she have to not piss off her own military, I also think if you have an economic relationship with a major power that's also engaged in a genocide of Muslims, maybe don't criticize the genocide. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if she wants to maintain her relationship with China as a trading partner, calling out her own Rohingya genocide by her military would also probably bring to light concerns about the Uyghur Muslims in China. So there might be a little bit of that as well.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that, but that's true. I mean, they both can share that unfortunate, black mark of being involved in some sort of cultural cleansing.
Right.
And the interesting thing, though, is that there's a guy named Kurt Campbell who's on Biden's National Security Council, and he actually in 2009 was part of Obama's team to kind of bring Myanmar to the table. And he is there again. Like I haven't been super impressed with some of Biden's policies so far, but I've liked on the international scale what they're doing. Antony Blinken last night was talking about that, but this guy I think could be instrumental. The Economist has a good article on this guy, Kurt Campbell, and he basically they think could be instrumental in at least, I don't know, like bringing back something like democracy. But then again, like, is it going to be just a facade again? I don't know. But I think that's an interesting point you have, is that, you know, China and Myanmar unfortunately share some grievances with a group inside their country that they deem deplorable. So we'll see what happens there.
And calling it out, and that's why she's not calling it out. Like, even if she had the moment to be like, hey, we messed up with Rohingya, I don't think she'd call it out, because it would then also turn eyes to her biggest trading partner, right? That's like that's like the warrant of the argument.
Definitely. I totally agree. So let's move to Russia. Are you down to take a little trip north?
Let's do it.
I just want to plant an idea here, and I want to know your opinion, then we can get into Russia. I think Russia and Myanmar are having the same exact problem right now. I think that Alexei Navalny, for a long time, Putin has actually wanted to keep around because it gives the facade of democracy, right? There's a term in political science for Russia specifically called managed democracy, which is basically the idea of you have a strong state, which is basically a one-party state, but you keep kind of a fringe party around so people think they have options. And it kind of seems like he's been that for a long time. But then again, recently, Putin's kind of crossed the brink when they actually now have locked him up. They've tried to poison him. They are clearly now trying to actually get rid of him. And to me, it's like Myanmar, where the generals finally decided to do something about this opposition.
Yeah. Alex Navalny is definitely one of the, like for someone, you know, for someone like us who's like really engaged in politics, we understand that, you know, like, Russia kills journalists, you know, threatens people, has kind of a lock on free press, and this is nothing new. But I think what's significant is just how open and blatant it is, and it's so blatant that Navalny was like poisoned. Right, the Russian government is trying to say that he was just, you know, we had nothing to do with it. He probably was just food poisoning. The dude was poisoned by the government. It's so blatant that I think it's really waking up maybe a lot of Russians to what's going on, or at least you know, getting people that maybe weren't politically engaged now engaged. And one thing that I just found here from the Moscow Times, it says 1 in 4 Russians watched Navalny's Putin Palace investigation. So I guess he put out,
oh boy,
you know, so yeah, 1 in 4, right? So the power of media, right? The investigative documentary. Navalny's investigation alleges that Putin and his close associates laundered money to build the opulent Black Sea Palace. Boom. So they're just like one little investigation about corruption. 1 in 4 Russians watched it. So Alex Navalny is obviously striking a nerve with, you know, with the public, with Putin himself. And so that's like, it all makes sense. They see him as a threat. He's influencing people to view Putin as what he really is a corrupt billionaire crony oligarch that has buddies in power, and they will maintain power until they can. So
yeah.
Now that it's blatant that he was poisoned, and then he was sent to Germany, allowed to go to Germany for it was just like to get some medical help, and then upon arrival back into Russia, he was arrested and put on trial. And now you're seeing that Navalny is calling for protests in the courtyards of big cities. There's a lot of protests going on. And we've seen protests spark in and out of Russia for a while against Putin. That's nothing new either, but I think that Navalny is definitely someone people can rally behind, like a real leader and a face to put on a movement, and that's why he's so dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, first off, I kind of wish I'm kind of jealous of Putin's Black Sea casa. Looks pretty nice from what I've seen. but all jokes aside, I do think that Putin and Navalny represent just two completely different Russias. You know, you have Putin's kind of the pride and, you know, nostalgia for Soviet Russia. And Navalny is what the younger generation wants. You know, they have phones, they have somewhat of a facade of openness. They don't want a corrupt state that masquerades as a democracy. And from what I've seen, older people still gain a lot of Putin support, but the younger generations don't. Now, I think it's careless that Putin actually has taken these actual steps in assassinating Navalny, because like in Myanmar, when the generals decided to actually remove Xi, it's kind of crossing that line, right? Because now people know, it's out in the open, that this guy's an enemy of the state, and he was never an option. He's jailed, and now I think we've seen, the repercussions of that. Germany, Poland, and Sweden all declared a Russian diplomat a persona non grata, which is kind of like an enemy of the state, basically. And so the EU is reacting, which I'm happy to see. Even Poland, which is quite right wing and buddy with Putin, they're even calling this out. So just on an even EU international scale, there's going to be some serious blowback. Now, Germany has this Nord Stream 2 pipeline with Russia. So I'm curious now how that plays out. But we're seeing this thing as like, okay, Russia's been somewhat of a NATO quasi-ally with a lot of these countries, but it's clearly not a democracy. And I wonder what's next, because Putin's literally like a 21st century czar, and nothing topples that except for revolution, in my opinion.
Yeah. And now you have a martyr, a big popular martyr that people can rally behind. Will it go all the way? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that, but I do think that Navalny is like it's so obvious that he was an attempted assassination, and he's popular among the youth, that if there's anyone to really shake things up, it could be this. It could be this moment. And it really does. I don't know. It really does take some monumental shifts to get rid of someone like Putin. Because again, you have to remember that Putin is stepping down eventually, but he's most likely going to keep someone in power that's just like him. And then he's also exempt from, I think, any investigations after he's out of office. I just pulled up his palace, by the way, and dang, that thing looks fire.
Sign me up, man.
Let's see. Its estimated cost $1.4 billion to build. Billion. Dang, dude, that is crazy. Look at him smiling on his hockey team.
There's a lot of rumors that Putin could be the richest man in the world.
Yeah, because we don't even know how rich he is. We don't even know. He doesn't even disclose it. I'd buy it. Or at least up there with some of the big dogs. Yeah, pretty wild. I really hope that I can see a day where, well, I definitely will, but I definitely will see a day where Putin no longer exists. But I definitely hope I can see a day where Russia's actually like a democracy, like you said, like Myanmar, like it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It is a faux democracy. He is a czar, and people like Navalny are exposing that.
Well, now it's all out in the open. So maybe now that the people know that there's actually no choice, maybe that's when they finally react. Now that they know that Alexei never had a chance of anything, maybe that younger generation reacts. I don't know. That's
a real stop the steal right there. That's actually worth stopping a steal.
True.
Because Putin does legit steal elections. That is worth an actual uprising. And then, okay, do you want to touch on India a little bit? Let's do a little quick bit. India. The last big protest we've seen in the last couple weeks is, it might even be the biggest of all in history, which is the massive protests coming out of the Punjab in India, led by the agricultural farmers of that region, against the regulatory changes that India is doing on their agricultural industry. And so, obviously, Alex and I, neither of us are Indian. I've never been to India, so we're certainly not experts in this field, but it's a super interesting topic because it's looking to be one of the largest protests ever in any democracy, just because of the sheer number of people involved, the implications for the largest democracy, which is India, and we've talked about Modi recently and before about authoritarian slips and his Hindu nationalism, and how now this is playing a part in India's agricultural industry. And so what happened, as far as I understand, is that India had for a long time had a minimum amount of rupees that they would pay to their farmers for their crops. And it was like a guaranteed payment. You could basically call it a subsidy, I guess, to maintain that their agricultural sector is strong and supported, and the millions of impoverished people in the Punjab can at least have money to survive. Now the changes Modi's government wants to make would be to get rid of that minimum amount of payment that they would receive from the government and open up the agricultural sector to private investment. Modi's government has claimed that this would, let's see, they've claimed that this would like increase their profits. Here, I'll get it right here. Leaders of the ruling BJP party, which is Modi's, says that the new farm laws would double farms' income, a promise made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2016. So they said it would double their income. The farmers themselves don't seem to believe that to be the case, and they've protested against this opening up to private investment, and they want those price guarantees. So that's kind of just like a basic background. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think, Alex? Like, what's your initial gut reaction to something like this?
So I'm like, at first, it's kind of actually been huge because you now had Greta Thunberg being involved in this, Rihanna. Like, there's a lot of people who I don't think you would have worried farmers. And then yesterday or the day before, there was that basically breakage in a glacier that flooded, and there's like hundreds missing, dozens dead.
Yeah, tragic.
And I think it's all related, right? It's all there's definitely a climate crisis inside of India. And so we have international spotlights on this. You know, Greta Thunberg, there's now apparently the Indian government is investigating her for a conspiracy because they think she's trying to stop the government and all this crazy jazz.
Oh my God.
But, you know, I do want to say with the sheiks in the Punjab region who are protesting, there is one thing that I think is interesting is that I was reading out of the The Guardian. And it was talking about how this group of sheiks basically has always had extreme political might inside of India when it comes to agriculture. And now they've lost some of that. So they're angry. I kind of would equate it to unions who have always had a say, who might be kind of eroding some of their power. And so now they're angry. So I'm curious if it's just because they don't like not maybe seeing the same thing happen again, or if it's actually going to be detrimental to them. And I think only time will tell us that. But the worrying thing is the violent protests have been nuts. Like, there's like trucks that have torn down bridges and blockades. The police are getting violent. And to me, the more worrying part is that India is basically getting rid of free speech. They basically are cutting off Wi-Fi, phone service, just in anticipation of protests, not even due to violent protests. There's an idea that speech in some like African countries, there's always a joke inside of Uganda that free speech is only free until you say it, and then everything's out the door. And I think that's kind of what India's taken to the next level, is they're basically saying, before you can say it, we're just going to stop it. And I never really thought India was a great democracy. I think it is nuts that for a while they were pluralist. They were looking for, you know, the idea of conversation, parliamentary discussion, stuff like that. I like. But clearly under Modi, that is not happening. It's a Hindu national state. And this just seems to be another step in Modi's kind of breakdown of free speech. So that's about all I can say.
There's definitely two angles to this. The first one is the economic angle. And I think that let's not forget that agriculture, I think in most, like at least in the United States, agriculture has always been treated a little bit differently than like what we'd always consider like the free market. Farmers in the United States receive a ton of subsidies, and especially during the pandemic, a lot of farmers were paid to just have crops at the ready in case things got better again. And then a lot of them were forced to just like throw away old crops, but they were still paid for it by the government. There's a lot of weird transactional things that go on in agricultural sectors between governments and farmers because of the risk of like famines, droughts, floods, especially global competition, right? Globalism and the agricultural sector going global has created there's been a lot of interesting and different mechanics used by states to maintain some stability in their agricultural sectors. That includes things like minimum prices and subsidized. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's not like, I don't think it's like against anything, any creed of a modern state or democracy to do something like this. And again, even the United States, where we tout our love of the free market, we subsidize our farmers all the time. So the idea of this going into opening up the Indian agricultural industry to the private sector, it would be a little bit worrying, I think. I think that these farmers are worried that they're going to get exploited by maybe foreign investment. I'm not exactly sure how much would be domestic or foreign investment in the private sector of the agriculture industry. I'd have to look more into that. But I can understand how someone who is used to being having a guarantee by the government, having a stable job, having that be open up to a volatile private sector, which for especially for like foreign investment in agriculture has had a lot of extortion in the past. I could see why people are upset. And then, of course, you brought up the free speech angle, which plays into it. And we talked about the guy, Vidya Krishnan, who is the writer. You showed me this link from The Atlantic. He's also a writer for The Caravan in India, and how they were like shut down by the government for criticizing. For criticizing, and he said how that's completely antithetical to India's creed, and they hold a lot of the same things that Americans hold dear: free speech, the idea that you can be, you successful regardless of race, religion, and sex. These are things that ideally India holds dear, but like you said, it's changing into a Hindu nationalism, and that also plays a part in this Punjabi revolt or protests. And so, yeah, man, we're seeing huge, massive protests for what I would consider legitimate reasons in all three of these cases, and a common theme is who are the big players in the economic aspect of it, right? With Myanmar and Russia, with billionaires in China, or like here with India and Myanmar, you have the problems with free speech. Both of these times in Myanmar and India, the internet was shut down by the government. A common tactic when protests start to get out of control, you shut down the internet so you can stop the social media formations of protests. So, It's interesting to see three big protests happen at once, and to see all the parallels, and to understand why these phenomenons happen, and to not just see them as random flashes in the pan. We can actually pull information and patterns out of what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, absolutely agreed. And the one thing I'll just say before we're done with this one is I actually think, very well said. I totally agree with you. And, I would be down to have a conversation with Modi's government about deregulating the agricultural industry and what that could do to the economy. But the problem is they're silencing it before that conversation even takes place. And that's just kind of this preemptive canceling or suppression of free speech. But also I would say that I actually think of the three countries we've talked about today, India is the worse off, because it's out in the open in Russia. It's out in the open in Myanmar. But India is still in the suppressive stage. And I think that's going to be hard to control, especially with the different religious nationalism and just the clashing. I just think India is almost too big to be a democracy, to be completely honest. And we're going to see that, I think. So, yeah.
Interesting take. Let us know what you think on this. What do you see? Is there any patterns for these protests? Are these legitimate protests? Do you think that these protests will be successful or change anything or not? Let us know your thoughts. We want to hear it all. And feel free to check us out on YouTube, Podbean, Facebook, Instagram, and now recently we're on Spotify. So if you enjoy listening to your podcast on Spotify, look for us at the Tonic Accord at Spotify, and you can get all our content there in audio form. If you're watching us live, stay tuned, because we're going to be doing our tier list of news sources, who sucks, who doesn't, and our opinions on that. I'm sure you'll agree or not. And so stay tuned for that. If you're listening recorded, then that'll be the next episode for you guys. So take care, everyone, and thanks for listening.
You better agree with us.
Okay, that's that one.
I'm going to run to the loo really quick. Big surprise.
Do it.
We should have it over under. When will Alex not have to use the bathroom?
Over under bet, yeah. Do a wager.
I'll be right back.
All right. Here, call. All right, the tier list.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I just put that one in the drive as pulling patterns from 3 major protests.
I like it. Nice alliteration there.
When in doubt. And then this one, we'll just do the tier list. I figured we could just go real casual and fun on this, man. We'll just like shoot the shit, say what we want to say. And we just go off of the ones that they have here. I don't even, most of these I know. Some of them I haven't really read anything from.
Do me one favor. I sent you that link for that other one as well, just because there's one point I want to bring up.
Sure.
With, like, I'll just be like, yo, Drew, pull up that other one real quick.
Yeah. I'll have. Okay, sure. Let me. Can I open this link? Open link in like a. There we go. There we go. Got it.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Yeah, we can let's make it fun.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. This is perfect. These two tabs will just be great. So we can put our tier list for what we want, and we can also look at that about like the leaning. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. I'll intro this one.
Yes, sir. Hit him with that intro.
What up, guys? What's going on, guys?
America?
Do a high energy. Are you ready?
Yep.
Wait, hold on. There we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tonic Accord podcast. We're coming at you with a tier list. This is who we think is good and bad in the world of news sites and political reporting. We think that this would be a fun one just because we want to have some fun. It's been a stressful freaking year. There's a lot of crazy crap going on lately, so we figured we'd just kind of do a tier list for fun because it's fun. So let's get into it. Alex, tier list. Give me some of the good ones. Give me some of the bad ones. And I also know you shared with me this like lean chart, and I do want to take a look at that. So tell me what you think of that.
Okay, cool, Drew. Good to be talking. Yeah, actually, while you're just on that chart, I just wanted to start out with kind of how I view this chart. We have, center, then we have left and right, and then we have kind of like left, and right. So like hard left, hard right. And I basically tell people, stay inside those first 3 categories where it's like center left, center right, because when you get to the far left or the far right, those aren't reputable news sources, in my opinion. Those are opinions. Like, you could not say Breitbart or BuzzFeed are really giving you good news. I don't think you could say that, let's see, Huffington Post and The Blaze are giving you good news. So stay in the middle, guys. Stay somewhere not too extreme. But okay, I'll give you my top 2 and my top bottom ones, and if we have time, I'll go further. But The Economist is my number 1.
Okay, so hold on. So for you, you're putting Economist S tier.
Yes, because I think it's a British magazine that has great insight, especially into American politics, because I think they have a great outsider look into kind of what we're doing. They kind of have the Adam Smith classical liberal view where like free markets are good, but we need to help people with social safety nets as well. And they just cover everything, man. And
they do, and very well.
Yes, very well, exactly. And so my tie for second is The Atlantic and Reuters. So I think Reuters is seriously unbiased, and The Atlantic is kind of like, I kind of put it similar to The Economist, but on an American standpoint. They're definitely left-leaning, but they bring in contributors from the left and the right, and I think they actually criticize the left sometimes when you wouldn't think they would.
Yeah, I haven't disagreed with that. Reuters, I would maybe put B tier. Well, I guess they're pretty good, but definitely Economist to me, you got me into them. S tier. Even when I disagree with them, I think their arguments are genuine, well reported, thought out, sourced. You could get a good balance of world takes if you spend enough time on their site. They won't. And they have a pretty good reputation. The Economist is definitely S tier. Atlantic's up there as well. Let's see. For me, NPR is A tier. kind of boring, kind of a little boomer and lame, but I do like their content because it's good reporting. It's good that it's boring and lame. I think that's its strength. It's not supposed to be entertainment. It's supposed to be like news, and that's what you get. Let's see. We could just go down the list. AP. I mean, that's just literally just facts, right? So if not S tier, maybe I'll do A tier because AP doesn't give like the like AP doesn't give you like an interesting like take. It's literally just facts. So maybe A tier. I don't know. What do you think? AP, S tier, A tier?
No, I think A tier is a good one because you're right. There's not like an in-depth analysis that kind of like I like The Economist because they add opinion analysis to facts, right?
Right, and as long as you realize that's what you're getting, then that's fine, and they make it known, and that's the idea. Is like, you know, the opinion side, like the opinion side of The Economist will have a good balance of different opinions, and they make it very clear that it's opinion based. So that's what's good. Whereas someone like Blaze here, I'm gonna have to put down an F tier. I think Blaze is clickbait garbage, and it's identity politics for the right.
Yep.
And I think that I don't know if they're here. Oh, here they are. Here they are. Occupy Democrats is right there with them.
Oh God.
Right there with them. F tier clickbait trash. If you ever go on Facebook and scroll through Occupy Democrats, it's the most like virtue signaling SJW, like really left leaning, like just bad. Trying to portray itself as news, but it's really left leaning propaganda. So it's down there F tier. What else is your F tier?
Well, first, I would love to occupy that publication and take it over because, yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so into the bottom tier, mine, the Epic Times, would be number one because they have a really interesting advertising strategy, is that they basically do ads on your YouTube videos. So I was watching Tim Dillon a few days ago, and I got a advertisement for the Epic Times, and they make it sound like it's this reputable news source. And then the same day, I looked in the mail and I actually received the Epic Times in the mail, and it looks like the New York Times. If you pull it out, it looks like a reputable source. But then when you start digging into what they're saying, it's like deep state conspiracy, Hunter Biden, the hoax of Trump, in Russia, the election was stolen. It basically is masquerading as a New York Times-esque publication, but it's spewing bullshit. So I would put that very, very, very bottom. They have this guy. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the ad. They have this guy who's reading it, and it's actually that guy, the guy with the beard right there.
Editor-in-chief.
And he basically talks about how finally you're getting good news. And it's appealing, and they're actually probably lying to people and getting them to subscribe. But there's not a lot of good news in there. It's all very deep state-esque, I guess I would say. And
they got demonetized on YouTube, it looks like.
I wonder why.
A letter from the editor. YouTube demonetizes the Epic Times. Yeah, I think I received some of those ads as well. It was like a guy. It was like a guy like a polo being like, "Do you need a news station?" Yeah. Weird. I don't. They're not even on this tier list. That's okay, but we'll put them down in F tier. The Epic Times. Nice. I'm gonna get off their website so they don't get any more ad revenue.
Okay. Okay. Well, the second one then, BuzzFeed. I think BuzzFeed is. Let's not put F. Let's put D. Because this was a website that started as kind of a quiz type of platform, right?
Yeah.
Where you can go on there and find which Lord of the Rings character you look like. I got Legolas or something, I don't know. But it went from that to all of a sudden they're breaking stories. They've actually broken some pretty serious stories involving like collusion. I remember back in the day when the Russia stuff was going on.
Right.
And I just don't find them very reputable. It's a lot of kind of like clickbaity, though you can kind of verify it stuff that I think is actually made a lot of maybe more center-left people fall for it. And so I do think that they're misleading.
Yeah, BuzzFeed News is a weird one because it did have this like moment where it almost became a reputable news source like a year or two ago. And I even saw like pundits being like, well, ignore the main website, but the news section is actually somewhat legitimate. And it's like, interesting, but I think it's plagued by its name. I think it's plagued by its ties to clickbait culture. I mean, BuzzFeed is the reason we have the word clickbait. like that's like BuzzFeed conquered clickbait so early on. So yeah, I mean, D tier. It would be like a C if it was on its own. If it was just like blowy news on its own. It'd be maybe C tier because it has broken some stories. It's not the best, but I think the ties to BuzzFeed drops it down.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
BBC. Let's just go. I'm going to go down these. BBC. B. That's for me. I think their ties to the British government is worrisome because they don't criticize enough of Britain itself, but they do good international reporting, and I do love me a classic BBC reporter voice.
Yeah.
The guy that's like today in Pakistan, the ISIS has fought 4 new troops. I do love that stuff. BBC News. So, but I do think they have a reputation for not criticizing the British government, not running stories of pedophilia among the British government. So they obviously do things to help the British government, but they're really good at reporting other governments.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because I kind of treat BBC like NPR for American news. I don't get my British news from BBC because I think you're right, but they do a great job of international reporting. And I do find for this podcast, especially, I do get a lot of my just kind of headline news when, if we're talking about the Rohingya situation in Myanmar.
Right.
The BBC does a great job of telling you kind of the basics of what's happening.
Right. I mean, hey, my India farmer protests, how rural incomes have struggled to keep up. We didn't really get too much into it, but we talked there's wages and debts. That's all BBC News. So they're definitely good. But it's a good point. Don't get your British news from the BBC. That's funny. Business let's do Breitbart. I mean, for me, it's F.
Okay.
For me, it's F tier. I think it's alt-right trash. I think it's reactionary, it's inflammatory, and it's based in it's just Steve Bannon's garbage. What do you think?
I'm gonna give them a D for not the reason why I actually think their news is good, but because I think they early on were interested in kind of getting the temperature for cultural trends inside of the United States. It was Andrew Breitbart who said culture's downstream from politics, which is something that kind of Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire have taken to kind of as their religion. And I do think that the significance of Andrew Breitbart should not be ignored because he did understand that politics is more than politics. It's about the culture of it and what are people seeing, what are people reading, what are people watching. And that's something I think the left has always won is the culture, the culture of what people on Netflix, on HBO, what are people doing? And I think Breitbart tried to be that. Now the Daily Wire is kind of like Breitbart 2.0, but I don't read Breitbart. I don't think I've ever even read more than an article. I think you're right. It's to me, it's on the same level as the Blaze, but they do. I think Andrew Breitbart himself, maybe not the paper, he was good at gauging what's happening in the country.
Well, that's definitely true. That's definitely true. Because they're very successful compared to what they were 5-10 years ago. So I agree with that. But as far as getting your news, are you going to get unbiased, good, factual news? No way. No way. We don't have to go through all of these. So I'm gonna start just doing some biggie boys. CNN gets a C in my book. CNN is kind of the poster child for mainstream media. And it kind of deserves this slot. I still think that if you watch CNN, if you watch CNN and compared to someone who doesn't watch CNN, and that's the only baseline you're going off of, the guy who watches CNN, in my opinion, is more informed. But it doesn't mean he's completely informed. It doesn't mean he's informed correctly or without bias. CNN, I think, gets a lot of things wrong, is very, especially more recently, is really trying to, like you said, gauge culture and base their reporting off of that. So they'll report stories about a white woman named Karen harassing a black man. That will get a ton of viewage. And of course, I still don't think that's right. But is that really the news story that everyone needs to see right now? You know what I mean? They really play off culture war. So CNN gets a C because sometimes they do give you good news. The airport version of CNN is better. The airport version of CNN is way more just basic news. But if you're watching mainstream CNN all day, you're going to be kind of annoying. You're going to think that everything in the world is falling apart. And I would encourage anyone that goes to CNN a lot to really expand their sources. I check CNN as a homepage just to see what headlines are, just to see what how the cultural headlines. I don't view them as what I think. It's just CNN is a good way to get a pulse on like American headlines and where mainstream media is at, but it's not a good way to get all your news. Not at all.
Yeah, and going off of that, like, and hear me out, I would probably put Fox News next to CNN as a C, not because of all of Fox News's coverage, but again, I think you brought up a really, really good point, is that the daytime coverage on both Fox and CNN is quite just breaking news, like covering the stories with a different like tinge, whatever you believe in, and then you get into the nighttime shows, and they're also the same. Like, I feel like both of them claim to be non-biased. But then as soon as the clock hits like 5 p.m., it gets super biased. Like Don Lemon to me is the equivalent of Hannity. Like Don Lemon has said so many fake and just like out of context things. And clearly Hannity, I would say, is worse because he did, go along with this stolen election propaganda and all that. But yeah, as soon as you get into late night on CNN or Fox, they become biased news. And I hate that both of them say fair and balanced and, just covering the news. But you're right. If I sat in the airport and watched CNN, or if I go on Fox News's main website, it's probably going to be a relatively non-biased take on the news. And so, yeah, those two I would put as a C. They really are just kind of establishment during the day, and let's play with fire at night. Yeah,
their reporting part, like Fox, for example, like Fox News actual reporting, their factual reporting wing is fine. I mean, hell, they called Arizona before everyone else did. Like they reported the election pretty fairly. It's the opinion section. Like for me, the opinion section of Fox News is D, but the reporting is probably a C. For me, CNN is a C for both. So, but you're right. They're both there. I mean, like if you watch Fox News and CNN all day, you will get a somewhat of an understanding of where American public lies, but you will not get a nuanced and critical and analytical approach to any issue very deeply at all. No. You'll just get a very skim the surface. What do Americans feel right now? That's what you'll get from these two, but you're not going to get good news. Let's go to, let's see, what's good on here? How about this? InfoWars.
Are we talking information or entertainment?
Information F, but because let's be real, it's an F. But as far as entertainment, bro, S, dog.
I was telling my dad this, is that like, I feel like if people had the ability to double check or fact check what the information they're getting, I feel like Alex Jones never would have been canceled, because like he's relatively funny and entertaining, but it's just you had too many freaking just people that are sheep and just followed whatever he said, and now he has been very dangerous to the like zeitgeist of the nation. Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's like Roger Stone and Alex Jones BSing about deep state stuff and frogs turning gay. I'm with you. But I do. I'm not gonna lie. I love watching Alex Jones. He's hilarious.
Me too. I mean, first of all, I also want to be very clear. I hope that none of our viewers are also avid InfoWars viewers, like unironically. But if you are, InfoWars is not a news channel. InfoWars is a marketing campaign to peddle male enhancement products. If you look at every single episode of Alex Jones, he ends by selling you some pill or some fake biochem mind enhancer. He's a snake oil salesman. So obviously, in my opinion, he's an F, but man, is he fun to watch. And like you said, him and Roger Stone, they'll do a mountain of cocaine and go off about Hillary Clinton. It's great. But not news, not at all. Another one that I think is bad from the left is Mother Jones. This is maybe D or even F. I mean, every single Mother Jones article I see is the most like clickbaity, supposed to piss off anyone who's not like a rad femme. Like it's very like radical femme clickbait, like.
Well, I mean, the name.
It'll be stuff like should Simpsons writers make Homer Simpson trans? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like so out of left field. So yeah, Mother Jones, honestly, F tier.
I don't know if the Babylon Bee is on here. I'm assuming not, but I find the Babylon Bee amazing. I would
I mean,
give it
that's
an S.
satire, though. That's
Oh,
satire.
of course, of course. But okay, so the one casualty of the last 4 years, I think, is the New York Times, who a couple years ago I would have given an A, and now I'd kind of put them in C category. You know, they have great articles, great writers, and clearly know what they're doing. But I think they've lost a lot of credibility for me personally because they clearly are part of cancel culture, and I think the Republicans have kind of ruined that term because now Howley's going around talking about cancel culture while he has a book deal and can go on any news site to talk. But the New York Times, you know, there was what's her name, Barry Wise, who's quite a centrist Jewish reporter, and she basically wanted to write about cancel culture and about how the left is kind of like unsympathetic to some of these things, and she got laughed out of the building. And you know, you had that Tom Cotton article, you know, about calling the National Guard, and the editors were removed. It's almost like the New York Times has gotten so sensitive during this culture war, if you want to call it that, that they're afraid to put out anything that could be deemed controversial. And I think during a time like this, it just plays into the fear on both sides of just not being able to say what you think. And you know, the New York Times is such a great publication, and I'm just sad to see that you have people, especially on the editorial board, leaving so often because they said something that apparently the owners don't agree with.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. I remember that like letter came out of that editor who left and put out that, and it went viral about, you know, the silencing that she felt happened at the New York Times. It's definitely, I would still probably put him at a B for me, just because I do think the time, like, they probably, like, they, when they get it right, they're really good. When they get it right, like, it's really informational, informative, and I think good. But you're right that their reputation has dwindled. They used to be A. For me, they're down maybe in B. For you, they're down in C. So they're definitely on the way down. I go to the New York Times less and less. I have found that generally I go to the New York Times less and less. And then not to mention that I think they're now paywalled. So I don't even know if I'm going to pay for that.
No, I wouldn't.
So yeah. So good luck, New York Times. What else? I don't want to go through all these, but
Fair.
let's see. One American News.
Oh, definitely an S, dude. They let my boy Mike Lindell, who, if you haven't seen my recent catching up, I'm getting all the hate from the Mike Lindell fans, apparently.
Yeah. One American News is right wing propaganda. It's Fox News. If Fox News, took out if Fox News took off the gloves, that's them. So to me, they're F tier. MSNBC, D tier to me. I think it's, I can't stand like Rachel Maddow and that whole like liberal lineup. Even though I may agree with some of their opinions, it's just annoying. MSNBC is kind of lame. I don't know.
See, I would actually disagree. I would put them above CNN,
Whoa.
mainly because you know what you're getting with them.
That's true.
Like CNN tries to tell you like it's always unbiased and fair, and it's like no, they definitely hate Trump.
Yeah.
It's the same way Fox News is biased and fair, but Trump always is good. You know, like MSNBC, you know you're going to get Rachel Maddow, spewing about Trump, or Chris Hayes spewing about the Republicans. Like, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
CNN, like, if you're an alien who turned on the TV at the airport when you arrive, you're like, is this good news? I don't know.
They're a little bit more honest about where they're at. That's funny.
Yeah.
What about you? What about New York Post?
I would put them. Is there an E category?
They're pretty
or actually,
bad.
E, yeah. Well, they put out that Hunter Biden story with clearly no corroboration or anything,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't care.
And they were the one that buried the Stormy Daniels one, right? They buried stories for Trump and then planted stories for Trump. So that's about all I have to say about that. Politico, I put a C. I used to like Politico when I was in college. They do have some interesting things. They're kind of like they're political junkie snacks. And some of the stuff are really good, but much like Mother Jones, some of their stuff is really weird and clickbaity, and they like to play with things that like they'll still talk about like is Hillary Clinton being a woman why she didn't win? And you're like, dude, come on, man, like for real. So Politico used to be cool, but I think they're dwindling as well.
You know, I want to give I totally agree with you there. I want to actually give a weird shout out to Vox.
Dude, yo.
As I'm sure our listeners and you know, I like Ben Shapiro. I don't agree with him a lot, but shoot, I'm forgetting Ezra Klein, and there's the other guy who's left Vox now, but he was one of the co-founders. Gosh, what's his name? It's like Carlos Mazzi or something like that.
I'm not sure.
No, but anyways, he's they're the only guys of all the left-wing establishment who have been willing to go on Ben Shapiro's show and, you know, actually have what I would consider an A+ debate. You know, I don't agree with all of Vox's articles, but the fact they're doing these informational videos, these little shorts, and also that they are willing to go debate population and immigration with Ben Shapiro, I'm like, bring it on. Ezra Klein and Ben Shapiro actually had a great hour and a half debate where they were friends. They got along, but they disagreed. And I kind of like it. And so I don't read a lot of Vox's articles, but their videos can be informative. And the fact that one of their founders is willing to talk with the other side like that, I like that.
I think Vox does what the Young Turks tried to do, but better. So,
yeah,
like Vox is hip, young. They really cool graphics, this quick informational videos. But from most of what I see from Vox, I think is pretty well done and pretty good, and not even that like super liberal leaning. Like they'll just they'll talk about issues of environmentalism in Africa. If you consider that to be left leaning on its own, then maybe that's just you. But like that's an issue that anyone should be talking about. So like I like that you shout Vox. I like Vox too. I think that they have that youth information vibe about them that I think the Young Turks tried to do and got a little too weird with. Young Turks has had some weird characters, like really strange characters come out of the Young Turks, including what's that guy who went to the right wing and got completely like shafted by all his friends? Dan something.
I don't even know. I can't get over Cenk. His name's Cenk, right? I would love to punch him.
Yeah, he ran for office near me last year and lost. Yeah, so he's a controversial character. I like Hassan Piker, who became a Twitch streamer out of the Young Turks, who's like a political commentator. He's pretty radical left. I just like him because he's funny. But that's the thing is like the Young Turks, I don't think became what they wanted to, and so I put them in C, maybe even D. But I like Vox, which is also left-leaning and youthful, I think did it a lot better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just remember the video where Cenk, what's his name? Cenk
Uyghur, Cenk something like that?
Yeah. I just remember when Alex Jones trolled him at the DNC convention 4 years ago, and he couldn't take a joke.
Yeah.
Like he just is the most unlikable guy. He's too progressive for me. Now, Kyle Kalinske, I think, is part of the Young Turks. I agree with you. There's people on there I like, but I would probably go D.
Is Kyle Kalinske TYT? I thought Kyle Kalinske was on his own.
I believe he is linked. Let me see. He is his own personality, no doubt.
Yeah. Because I vibe with Kyle Kalinske, not all the time, but I vibe with Kyle Kalinske. I respect him. No, totally. And, I wanted to give a shout out really quick to a news site that is not on here, but I just actually feel like, okay, so it says, he's an affiliate of the Young Turks. Okay, so he's probably in their wheelhouse or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. But I just wanted to give a shout out really quick to The Bulwark. It's a independently started media company by Charlie Sykes and Bill Kristol, neocons, for all of you leftists who would probably hate that term now, but it's actually if you get away from the fact that Bill Kristol was involved in, perpetuating 9/11 he was involved in 9/11. I take that back, but he was involved in the invasion of Iraq and saying that it was a good idea. And these neocons under Bush, they have obviously been anti-Trumpers, never Trumpers, and there's actually an amazing podcast, The Bulwark, amazing news site, The Bulwark, and Charlie Sykes is a Wisconsin conservative radio guy, and he basically is like, we need to start a third party or redeem the Republican Party. And it's nice, as myself being kind of center right, it's nice getting a voice for conservatives that are actually worried about the party. And they talk about how the center left and the center right just need to maybe say, hey, we're not going to agree on gay marriage or abortion, but we can agree on practical Medicare policies or practical immigration policies, stuff like that. And they basically just bring on people like Adam Kinzinger, other just like conservative thinkers who are terrified of what's happening. And I really like it. They're genuine, and they know that whatever conservatism is not what's happening.
Now, but would they be like a news site or more of just like an opinion based site?
That's a good question, because yeah, that's a really good question, because I know, what was it, the Daily Standard or whatever that Bill Kristol was involved in, that went, the Weekly Standard, excuse me, went under, which was kind of like a conservative. Let's see, the Weekly Standard was a political magazine of news, analysis, and commentary, published 48 times per year. So, kind of a opinion. I would say kind of a, I don't know, but yeah, kind of more of a weekly magazine. Kind of opinion
it's like
with
a
news.
newsletter magazine. I'm checking it out right now. We will get through this together. Interesting messaging.
No, they're about unity, man. Like, they had a guy on today who was talking about, like, basically if you had a lemonade stand on the far left and a lemonade stand on the far right, if you actually wanted to bring people together or like benefit everyone, you would put a lemonade stand right in the middle, and you would get some people from both sides. So eventually the other two lemonade stands are like, hey, we're not selling anymore. We should move closer to this middle one. So their idea is that maybe they can tame down Trumpism and also tame down like the AOC progressivism, and be like, hey, we disagree on abortion, but we can agree on like, COVID funding and stuff like that. I think it's a necessary conversation on the right.
I vibe with it.
Yeah.
I can hear that. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a neocon by any stretch of the means, but I can vibe with that sentiment for sure. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here at the Tonic Accord, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Is making sure that people don't get too wrapped up in the extremes, whatever side, whatever quadrant of the political compass. Don't go too far down the rabbit hole. Cool, man. The Bulwark. So it's not on this list, but you would put that A tier?
Yes, because I don't think they cover enough like news to put, to really put them anymore. But
they're more of an opinion
they're
newsletter.
Good commentators.
Cool.
Yeah.
So last couple ones before we wrap this up. The last one I would put in S tier for me is The Guardian. I think The Guardian has, for me at least, for years, they've consistently given me good information, a variety of takes, and a lot of good international news. I think The Guardian's great.
Yes.
And again, it's like, it's not, and when people hear me when we talk about this, it's not about I agree with everything The Guardian puts out. It's just I think it's well done. I think it's well researched, well crafted, good, well sourced, and a good variety of topics. It's not about if I agree with it all the time or not. Now, obviously, the ones down in F tier, I probably disagree with most of what they say. Maybe not Occupy Democrats. They're just annoying and propagandist. But all of these in the F tier are very propaganda heavy and very biased and very disingenuous in their reporting. Whereas up at A and S tier are more legitimate in their reporting, well sourced, and it doesn't matter if I agree with them or not. It's just good news, or well done news and journalism. So again, I want to make sure that we're being clear about it's not about agreeing with. It's about quality of the reporting. And The Guardian and The Economist to me are S tier.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, pretty much most of the research when we're doing, say, like a pretty complex international issue or economic or whatever, for me, it's usually between The Guardian and The Economist. I totally agree with you. Like, I think that should be a litmus test for people, is like, can you read this, maybe disagree with it, but feel like you're getting information that maybe you didn't know? Or do you know that it's being fact checked? Like, are you being challenged? And I totally agree with you on The Guardian. It's a great news source. Is it English? I'm trying to.
I think it's British. Yeah, or yeah. I mean, it's from the UK. I believe
Whatever.
It's from the UK.
That's
Yeah, I mean, Economist as well. Isn't Economist in British?
Yeah, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, they're doing good. They're doing good, except for BBC. And well, actually, there's what's the? I mean, is it the Daily Beast? Is that British? That one's pretty bad.
And I think the Daily Mail is too.
Oh, the Daily Mail. That's what it is. The Daily Mail UK. Yeah, no, the Daily Mail is like Hollywood garbage.
Yes.
Like, here's what the princess wore a terrible dress today. Like, oh my God. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And they tried to dabble into politics too, which is always fun.
Yeah. So I took a picture of that tier list. Maybe we can like post it on the Instagram or something, like, do you agree, and see what people say. But
I definitely agree we should do that. And before we're out of here, the only last one I would say is foreign policy. I really like Foreign Policy. It's kind of like it's very adjacent to The Economist in terms of their leanings, I feel like. But as someone who loves foreign policy, they just do a great job of talking about the issues that a lot of other news sites don't even go into depth with.
Right.
Now, I think this is a U.S. leaning news source, so like most of their opinions are benefiting the U.S. So if you're like on the other side of that, maybe you won't like it, but it's really good. And I would also just put in the Wall Street Journal. I would put them as a B. So yeah, that's all I got for you.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and then there's a billion more we could do. We didn't even touch the Hill or the New Yorker or anything like that. But these are the big boys, and some of the fun ones like Infowars. Of course, remember, folks, that there is always bias in journalism. It's not something we can escape. It's just inherent in human nature. It's okay. It's just, as long as we accept it, realize it, and try and minimize it. And being honest about journalism and reporting. So, to claim that The Economist is unbiased is untrue. But there's certainly a gradient, I think, in the bias and the acceptance of it, or at least the acknowledgement of it. And then also the quality of reporting around it, regardless of the bias, is important as well. So just remember that when you're getting your news sources, diversify where you get your news sources from. Do your own due diligence to figure out, is this a trusted, reputable source or not? And maybe look at, and I encourage you, whether you're left or right, to look at some news sources from the other side and see what they're saying. Hopefully that has been fun and informative to you all. I'd love to see your tier lists. You can actually find this site, tiermaker.com. I just basically looked for news sites tier list, and this is what came up. You can do your own tier list, and you can share it with us. We'd love to see. So thank you all for tuning into the Tonica Core. Check us out at Podbean, YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and now Spotify. Take care all, and have a great day.
I'm going to go watch Infowars now.
Infowars, right, and The Blaze.